the recording for Q&A. All right.
Okay.
All right, let's do that. So normally what we do in Q&A is people can raise their hand. So raise their hand is under reactions. You know, if you go to reactions down there, you can actually find raise the hand. And then I would use raise the hand to call you. Now, David actually knows Chinese pretty well, so you can speak, you know, any Chinese dialect. He probably understands. So there's no need to talk in English, and I think he probably would respond in Chinese as well. All right, so I'm going to wait.
My Chinese is actually not that good.
So I am going to wait for people to raise the hand. Now, before you guys can warm up, I just want to say something, which is I came to this country to study in 1966. And of course, I didn't know anything about the civil rights and the Chinese Exclusion Act. And recently I learned all of this. And I'm surprised that before I came, Chinese were treated so poorly. So I'm lucky I have not encountered any of the things that David talked about, but I want to bring this presentation to you because I want to make sure David's presentation will be recorded because it's quite unique. He has really a good handle of the history, which you probably cannot, even if you go to really famous university like Columbia, you may or may not get someone like him who has a Chinese background. So anyway, let me see what, okay, I have James here. James, your turn. You have to unmute. James, you can talk now.
Well, thanks, David, for an excellent presentation. I have a few thoughts, more like based on my own experience, and I just want to see how your view from this your angle on the same issues. And number one is that I think that the Chinese American community in North America has learned a lesson from the past, and I'm very surprised and sort of pleasantly surprised to find that they actually took a lot of action in the old days, because we were always under the impression that Chinese are too docile, so they let things happen. Oh, sorry, my camera's over here. They let things happen, and therefore, in some ways, deserve what we got, and obviously that's not the case, and I think that what you've presented is a very powerful argument, and so thank you for that. But on that, I want to one observation is the period that you went through in North America. During that period, you can go to the court, you can go through many things, and there were a lot of people. I would call it a positive enlightenment phase, because America was very confident. It had a lot of resources, human resources and natural resources, and everything was moving in an enlightening direction. So maybe a lot of the cases you said worked, and now it's of course from a different starting point. I doubt it if it would ever go back to extreme violence. You never know. History repeats itself in a very strange way when people most unexpected, most unsuspicious of it. But what do you think if there is indeed a cycle, and if we have seen, you can there can be a lot of arguments that the United States is now going through a negative enlightenment phase. In that sense, I don't know whether you see that as a worry for the Chinese American community. That's my first observation. And the second one is that but again, that is in under a different environment. Once upon a time, when I was in Canada, I was teasing. You may say I wasn't against, but I was teasing the affirmative action, and I said that by being so fair and proper in advertisement, in your hiring policy, means nothing if it's not in your heart. In a way, I would prefer you to say, I'm hiring computer programmers, say, for example, no Chinese need to apply. I said, if someone like that can succeed in today's environment, not hiring Chinese in Vancouver and be successful, I like to open a company and not hire Chinese too. You know, of course, I was just being provocative. But there's certain truth in this affirmative action. It can easily turn into hypocrisy, just a show, you know. And I don't know whether that is indeed a problem still in North America, especially under the current atmosphere. And my number 3 observation, I think that I myself think that it has lessened a lot, is when I was there, I also noticed the phenomena of overcompensation. Sometimes a lot of Chinese second generation were more racist than the whites in order to demonstrate their loyalty to the new country. I myself, among my friends, the third generation has improved a lot. They are all bilingual, whereas and I say Hong Kong, a lot of Hong Kong Chinese are more Zhuxing than Zhuxing. Anyway, now the Zhuxing, they can speak perfect English and perfect Chinese, whereas Hong Kong Zhuxing, the Chinese is not as good as Chinese and the English is not as good as English. And when they see Guaylo, they speak Chinese. When they see Chinese, they speak English. So whether my question is, you know, I suppose Tai Chi is an odd exception. But do you think this maybe it's the Swedish, whatever they call the Swedish syndrome, this phenomenon of overcompensation and auto racism, is that still a problem, or do you share my observation that it's got a lot better? I'm sorry to have so many questions. Thank you again for your presentation. It was excellent.
Okay, James, thank you. The 3 questions or topic you brought up, I can do 3 separate lectures on each one. The first one about U.S.-China relations. The Chinese always knew, Chinese in America always knew how the Chinese are treated in America depends on U.S. relationship with China. It's always been that way. In the founding of America initially, Americans knew very little about the Chinese. But in general, during the Enlightenment period, Voltaire and all that, they thought about China positively with Confucianism. And of course, China was the exporter of culture to the world. It was the Zhongguo, the Middle Kingdom. And it was more advanced than most countries until the 1800s. So America knew very little about China except that it had Confucianism, it was wealthy, and that it was well run. But George Washington knew this about the Chinese, and he heard that the Chinese were very short. So we were dwarfs, but he didn't know that the Chinese were not white. This was a surprise to him when he found out that the Chinese were not white. So because of that, America knew very little. Then came the traders. I told you about the people that went to China, and they didn't like the Chinese. They, for the most part, wrote poorly about the Chinese because they did not understand the Chinese system of trading. They didn't like the idea of an emperor, of all these ministers to prevent them from trading. So maybe 2/3 of the traders in their diary wrote poorly about China. They wrote about worshiping deities, idols. This was terrible. They wrote about the poor people. And so it was very negative. What America received was negative. Then came the missionaries that came to China in the 1820s, 30s, 40s. And they also took a poor attitude about the Chinese. They themselves might have liked the Chinese, but a lot of their writings wrote poorly about the Chinese, oftentimes to get fellow Americans to donate more, about the problems of poverty, how they must convert the Chinese. And so, but that never worked too well for the missionaries. They converted very few Chinese. And I can talk a lot about that, why. And then, so the Chinese, even before the Chinese came to California, it was very negative. And then with the Chinese came the immigrant Americans. I have to distinguish the two. The general Americans, the upper class, upper middle class, really wanted Chinese to be here to develop the country and be workers and so on. But it was the poorer side, the other immigrants, that wanted the Chinese out. So that's enough of that. And then the next was, I can't read my notes. I think I'll go back to the affirmative action side first. Yeah, affirmative action is not a law of the United States. It's a executive order. It could be changed anytime. It was the president, I think Johnson, brought about executive order to level the playing field. The concept is that if you don't have enough people in a certain field, you have to make it easier for them to get into that field. And today's controversial for the Chinese. About 1/3 of the Chinese are anti-affirmative action because of the schools. They feel their children are discriminated against because it's harder for their children to go into the best schools. And that's in many ways true. But then on the other side, I'm telling these parents, okay, your students, your child is trying to get into the best school. If they don't get to Harvard, chances are they'll get to Stanford or Berkeley, Columbia. If they're good students and they are capable, they'll do good regardless. But the question is very well known and documented in industries like high tech and Silicon Valley. The Asian Americans are the least likely to move up to be manager, especially the Chinese Americans are the least likely, especially Chinese female, almost zero. And so my answer is, okay, do you need affirmative action there? If you throw out affirmative action for the school, then what happened to affirmative action in the workplace? Will your child be able to move up without a leg up or the ability to sue to change this? So that's the other thing. And I forgot the other one, affirmative action, US-China relations. Was there something else I didn't answer?
Oh, I was just commenting on the overcompensation on the Chinese region.
Overcompensation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. With the coming of Asian hate, Andrew Yang was asked, what do we do about this? And his answer was overcompensation. He says, Chinese, we need to be more American, be more like American. This is telling the victim to change. I think it should be the other way around. if our ideal for America is that there's equal protection under law, there's equality, we should eliminate racism, give everybody a chance of equal opportunity, then you don't blame the victim. There is overcompensation. There's a lot of psychological factors involved with this. We talk about the locus of control, the locus, whether you feel you can control your environment or your environment control us. For the Chinese, many of us, our locus of control is external. We talk about fate, 缘分. So if we take a test and we fail, we say, "Oh, we didn't get enough sleep last night. The test was not what the teacher taught us." That would be external. You try to make some kind of cue. Internal is you have to study harder next time. So there's difference in approach depending on if you feel the control is internal or external. And there's a lot of other reasons. But the question I have to ask most people that talk about Asian hate, I have not heard anyone tell me, how do you stop it? You know, all our politicians, our leaders, our teachers, they talk about stopping Asian hate, that we cannot continue this. Jerry Yang with his the Asian American Fund, they claim to have raised $1 billion to try to stop this. So far, I have not seen anyone coming out saying this is what we need to do to stop it. Some people say education. I said, what education? What do we tell people to stop this? I think most people that commit these, they have the person that commit these acts, they have mental problem, you know, and to have 11,000 for all of America, I think you're going to get this many crazy people regardless. So I'm not sure if it's really a problem or a problem we look at. But for me, there is a solution. There's two. One is you go and read up about microaggression by a Chinese American, Dr. Darrell Su of Columbia. This microaggression is the buzzword for the Black Lives Movement. It's one of the solutions, awareness of microaggression. So you can look up Dr. Darrell Su, S-U-E, at Columbia. He's working on solutions now. He pointed out the problem. The other is contact hypothesis. The US spent a lot of money in 1950s to study how do you integrate people, especially Blacks, into the military. So if you look up contact hypothesis, you Google it, it's by a guy named Gordon Allport. He says to have true integration, you need three factors. You have to have people coming together, meeting each other. You have to have contact. That's easy. You have a party, you have a meeting, you call people together, but you have to have equal status contact. People coming together must feel equal. That's one component you must have, whether it's academically equal, financially equal, politically equal, they must feel equal coming together. Lastly, towards a common goal. They must have that common goal, believe in that common goal. If you have these three factors, you can have true integration. And I've used this a lot with youth groups and so on. It really works. It really works. But you look up contact hypothesis. So for me, that's a solution, but it's another thing that almost no one talks about. And I can have a whole talk on that alone.
But
So, by the way, James, due to time constraint,
okay,
I want to move on, and then later on I can come back to you. Okay, hey, Colin, you are next.
Hey, thank you, Winston, and thank you, David, for an excellent call. I spent 20 somewhat years in the US studying and working and then returned to Asia for another 20 some odd years now. While I was in the US, I certainly feel the discrimination factor from being a Chinese professional, right? The so-called corporate ceiling for Asian American is very, very prevalent. And I also have been very, very active with the Organization of Chinese America, OCA. In fact, that I was for 6 years, I was on the National Council of OCA, starting the year when S.B. Wu was the president. And back in those days, we focused a lot more on the civil rights activities like the Winston Hui murder cases and so. But I wasn't aware, even during those days, to have the insight that you presented today. Right? So we still think that the largest contribution for Chinese American is not available, and you got an excellent point and insight on today's presentation. So open my eye. So thank you for that. I do have two questions. Being away from the US for so long now, is that the corporate glass ceiling phenomenon are still there? It's still something that the Chinese Americans should work on. And the second thing is that while I was working with OCA back in those days, I always felt that we are not working together with the other minority group, like the Hispanic, like the Black America, enough, right? That we are back in those days, we don't even work too closely with the Japanese or the Korean, right? And each of us are fighting an independent battle, in our own silo. I noticed that we're doing a lot better now with the Asia community, so that we're not just Chinese American anymore, but we are mostly talking a lot being in the name of Asian American. But how about Hispanic and the Black? Are we able to merge forces with them, or we're still in an Asia silo? Thank you.
Okay, the question about Silicon Valley, the bamboo ceiling, is still very much there. This guy, Buck G, a friend of mine, he got all the data from the high-tech firms themselves that provide the data showing how poorly Asian Americans are doing. The exception are the South Asian, the people from India, who has the language advantage and the British influence in India from way back. But for Chinese American and the other Asians, it's still very much a bamboo ceiling. And he has all the statistics to prove it. And it's been going on for 7 years since his report came out. And he renewed the report about 2 years ago, still the same, if not gotten a bit worse. What it takes is a lawsuit, and organizations like OCA and so on should really consider that, or a threat of a lawsuit. But before you do the lawsuit, we must come up with a solution for these companies. And for the benefit of America, TSMC in Taiwan would not exist if this country were friendlier to Chinese professionals in the Silicon Valley. Many of them were forced out or felt this is not a place for us. And with the China initiative by Trump and the FBI, it's gotten worse. More and more scientists do not want to be here. If they have an option to be elsewhere, if China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore want to hire them, they're out of here. Because why should they be under the scrutiny? So we're talking about it. And there are lawsuits and cases. And it is an issue, ongoing issue. Now, my daughter considers herself Asian American, where I tell people I'm Chinese American. So that's changing. And there's so much intermarriage at about 35, 40%, especially amongst Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans with other ethnicity, that in 3 generations, our descendants won't look like us. Now, you're back in Asia. You can say, well, my descendants might look like me. For me, I know for sure after 3, 4 generations, they're not going to look like me. So the culture I'm very proud of, these values and discipline, I want to pass them on to my descendants that won't look like me, won't speak Chinese, won't have that much culture, Chinese culture. So I have to break it down where what I'm passing on makes sense to Americans in general, because those are my descendants. I don't plan to move back to Asia to live. And so I'm pretty sure my descendants won't look like me. So there's that difference too, between if you're talking about this living in Asia or you're here in Canada, US, or other country. Very few of the immigrants here realize their descendants won't look like them. And if they hold on to that culture that tightly and not fit in their context of their current environment, then they can't pass it on.
Well, I'm actually back in Asia only by myself. You know, all my children and grandchildren are in America. In fact, one of my daughter already married in America. So
yes, this is the reverse. Prior to 1965, we have 3, 4, 5, 6 generation of Chinese in America. Each generation are immigrants. And now you're reversing it, where the family's here in America, but you go to Asia to do your business. So it's been reversed. Yes, totally.
Now, but how about the my second question, David, about whether the Chinese Americans should work also closer with Hispanic and the Black?
Yes, yes, we definitely need to build these collaborations. Some of the nonprofits in San Francisco's Chinatown are doing this, but it's a slow process. We have one group that put together 5 Chinese high schoolers and 5 Black high schoolers, have them spent a month together traveling the US and learning about each other's culture. Hopefully with this background, they develop friendship using that contact hypothesis that you have equal status contacts towards a common goal, that they can build up these. And we have Chinese for Affirmative Action that's working with the other ethnicity. Some of the churches are having contacts, but they are not yet, they don't really understand they need to do more than just contact. They have to do projects where they have equal status contacts towards a common goal. And that's a very crucial part of it. Contacts won't do it. You have to have that equal status and that goal. And so we have to work this out, but I think the future is looking good. You need to have that to have a big enough political base. But for us Chinese American, we're very diverse. You know, we're very progressive. The majority are still Democrats, but that's shifting. But do you know, we Chinese Americans are the largest funders of the Proud Boys. When they ask for a donation after January 6, 2 years ago, Chinese Americans funded them 80%. More than 80% of their money came from Chinese Americans. So we are very diverse. So you can't put us together. So with SB Wu 80-20, that concept that he can get 80% of the Chinese to vote one way, I think is 51-49. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
All right. So I have 2 people in front of KK. All right. Kingo raised his hand before. Kingo, I'll give it to you. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay. Hi. Can I speak Chinese?
Yes.
Mandarin or Cantonese?
可以。
哦，OK，我想問問阿 David 咧， 即係你今日咧，我就睇個題目咧，就係講話第一批嚟美國嗰啲係中山人啦，係咪？
係。
咁咧就唔係台山人。咁咧，我想問一問咧，你有冇清唔清楚嗰批人第一批人係邊度嚟嘅咧？係從澳門嚟啊，抑或從中山嚟？同埋佢嚟到呢度咧，嚟到美國咧，係做生意啊，抑或係做勞工？點解我會咁問咧？因為咧嚟加拿大嘅第一批人係有史書記載嘅，即係有記載嘅啦。冇記載嗰啲就傳說嗰啲就唔講，有記載嗰啲係1788年3月10號就從澳門就跟一個英國嘅一個船長嚇叫做John 韋勒斯嚇 John Willis， 佢咧就坐隻船咧就嚟到呢度溫哥華島嗰度。咁嗰班係工人嚟嘅，嗰班係船嘅嚇，佢哋係經過呢個夏威夷。咁嗰陣時夏威夷都唔屬於美國啊，咁即係唔好計唔好計夏威夷先嚇。即係我話如果嚟到呢個美國呢邊嘅，你哋知唔知道第一批係喺 Chinese 嚟美國係喺中山人？你話中山人佢哋嚟做乜嘢？係去到邊度？喺邊度登陸？有冇呢方面嘅研究啊？即係有冇呢方面嘅資料咧嚇？因為我哋溫哥華依家揾到啦啊！因為我自己揾嘅，我揾到第一批中國人係幾時幾日嚇，從坐邊隻船去到邊度？依家連落地嗰個地點我哋都揾埋嚇。咁我又好想話了解下美國嗰邊有冇做呢方面嘅研究咧？因為呢個好緊要啊。
係喺美國有你喺加拿大早過美國，第一批係1788年，係嗰個喺近 Vancouver 都有成120個中國人喺嗰度。我轉翻英文，可能有第啲唔識聽。Okay, we already know in 1788, we had about 120 Chinese landed at Nuka Sound. They were brought there to build ships in the harbor near Vancouver. So the Chinese actually went to Canada first. And the Chinese Six Company, the Zhonghua Huiguan, actually we have more information about the Zhonghua Huiguan in Victoria than we know about the Zhonghua Huiguan in San Francisco, because their records were kept. They did not have the earthquake and fire. And the Zigong Tang, Hongmen, they probably started in Canada. Same with the China Empire Reform Association, Baohuangdang, also got started in Vancouver, Victoria area. So Canada is very important and influenced America quite a bit, the Chinese in America quite a bit. Now, we know the Zhongshan people came first because the Yanghe Huiguan, Yan Wo Huigun, is the Huigun for all the Zhongshan people in San Francisco, in California. They have 14,000 members at the end of 1850, by 1859. And they were more than any other group. They were bigger than the Samyup, the Sayup. They had the most money. They were mainly the merchants and the gold miners. They were the first to come here because they were near Macau, but I don't think they came from Macau. The reason is this: England banned slavery in 1834, I believe, 33 or 34. So Hong Kong became slave-free. So if you came to America through Hong Kong, at the port, they will ask you, are you coming to America on your own free will, or are you coming as a slave? So the people in China, in Guangdong, knew that if you left from Hong Kong, you're safe. If you left in Macau, you can end up in Peru being a slave, or in Havana, or in Jamaica. We know the Chinese were sent to Peru and Havana, Cuba, before they even came to California as slaves, because of the Hakka Bunde Kejia Bendi War. When the Bendi captured the Kejia, they would sell them as slaves, and they would be shipped to Peru and Cuba as slaves. So if you left out of Macau, you stand a chance of ending up in those places. You get Shanghai. If you left out of Hong Kong, you're pretty safe. So I don't know which part of Zhongshan they came from. We can do that research. I'm just bringing this out now. Almost no other researchers are saying this. I said, because I understand more Chinese history and culture. I said, the farmers in Toisan, they don't know anything about gold mining. Why should they come? But the Kejia, Hakka, they knew. And a lot of them, we say they come from Zhongshan. But Zhongshan, they had a lot of Hakka. So those people might have come to gold mine. And there were a lot of people in Zhongshan. So we know our first temples here, earlier temples, they were for Hou Wang, Hao Wang. And only the Zhongshan people worship Hao Wang. So there's a lot of influence, Zhongshan influence in the earlier years. Now, the Toisan people came in the 1860s when they needed a lot of workers.
AD60 應該唔會啊
1860s.
應該唔會啊
Then the Toisan people.
唔係因為三藩市嗰個舊金山嗰個淘金熱係喺1848年1848年啊，咁台山人5幾年先嚟，咁150幾年先嚟，咁就點淘金啊？都冇金啦，
還有金，有金。嗰啲西人 ，let me go back to English. Yes, there were still gold until 1900, 1910s. The white people, they pan gold very simple. They try to pick it up near the river, or they separate gold only on the riverbank, and they would give up after a year. But the Chinese, they work in groups. They had formed gongxi. This is a term used in Indonesia, in Borneo, because the Chinese were there for 200 years, gold mining, tin mining, and copper mining before gold was even discovered here. So they knew that the gold was underneath the river. So they had enough people to dam the river, to pan underneath the river, and they could see where the river used to be, maybe 100 years ago, and there's gold there, but there's no water there. So they would divert the water from the river, built dams to divert them to where the gold were. So the Chinese were able to do this for decades, for 30, 40 years. We know that in Oregon, we know that in Idaho. The white people will only do it for 1 year, 2 years and give up, but the Chinese did it industrial style, like they did it in Borneo. So they did it for decades. So there were still gold to be mined until the 1900s.
Okay, let me I know that King Gold wrote a book on Canadians, Chinese in Canada. So we are not going to resolve this issue. There could be some let's delay this a little bit. Now, the next one who submitted a question on chat is CK Lee. I give to CK and then I give to KK, okay? Hey, CK, your turn.
Okay. David, thanks very much for informative and inspiring talk. I'm a long-time student of history, but for this topic of Chinese population in American history, I would like to learn from you, what are your 1 or 2 key personal learnings of these? And any of these can be applied to the current landscape?
Yes, it's only in the recent maybe 15 years that books are coming out from the Chinese side. The history of Chinese America was written mainly by non-Chinese that didn't understand the culture in Toisan or in Guangdong. And most of them would come to San Francisco, go to Chinatown, interview some Chinese, and then write their books. They might spend a month or two. We have very little writing from the Chinese themselves to give the history from the Chinese side. But about 10, 15 years ago, we start having Chinese American writing. This one is Chen Yong. He wrote a book on Chinese San Francisco that was all from Chinese sources. It tells a totally different picture. It changed my mind about what Chinese history is. Then you have others now following. The problem is we don't have too much of the Chinese document. Gordon Chang at Stanford University did the Chinese railroad worker project. He had something like 300 researchers look for documents, and they found none that's written by the Chinese railroad workers. So they're rare in the earlier years. So I'm working with a group of volunteers to find these documents. They're in our libraries and our museums. Some are personal collections. So I'm doing a project with the Zhongshan library in Guangzhou to try to find these, scan them, and publish them. So researchers will have access to the history written by the Chinese themselves. Like we have like the Zigong Tang, their Hongmen. Their purpose was not really bad until about 15 years ago. Their purpose was to make China a democratic republic, to have free election, to be modern. So they helped Sun Yat-sen with the revolution. That was their purpose. And their documents just went to University of California at Berkeley at the East Asian Library. It's not open to the public yet, but they're going through that, and it will give a total different picture of what the Chinese were trying to do in America. One of the reasons the Exclusion Act came about was the Americans said, you Chinese always had an emperor. So you will always be loyal to your emperor. You will not understand elections. You will not understand the American system. So we don't want you here. Like the Catholics, you will always be loyal to your Pope. That's why the US never had a major politician until Kennedy in 1960. So it's that concept. But then if you read the history of the Zigong Tang, you will say, how can you say that when the 100,000 Chinese in America helped Sun Yat-sen finance him and gave him the idea to turn China, a country of 400 million, into a democratic republic in 1911. China was the third democratic republic in the world. US number 1, France number 2, China was number 3, was a republic. It didn't turn out that well until the Communist Party in 1949 had somewhat of a free election system. So some of these are coming out and it's telling a totally different story. So one of my passion is to find these collections, and there's a lot in Victoria and Vancouver. The Baohuang Hui, that influenced a lot, Americans a lot. In fact, the majority of Chinese Americans were part of the Baohuang Dang instead of the Zigong Tang. They wanted to preserve the monarchy. Anyways, a lot of that is changing. So being a historian, you have to be very flexible. Every time they find a new letter, a new document, you have to rethink your history. Like archaeologists, every time they find a new dig, they have to retell their whole story. There's a lot of hope.
And David, a quick one. Did you see it as a clash of ideologies versus, is it just a clash of economic and social status per se?
Yes, in many ways it's a clash. Is so many layers. It's very hard to understand. Was very hard for the Chinese to understand Western culture, and it was too big of a jump without Google to check. I mean, to find information. It was very hard to figure things out. You had to go to be a library, and even a library took you a long time to find out, to be educated. Today, we, totally different situation. I'm not a trained historian, but today I expect to find things online, and then I can confirm it. But you can be doing this with the internet today. You like this. We can ask the expert in different fields. It's a wonderful time to be alive. And we have to open our mind that what we've read before, we have to go back and see what is current.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, we have less than 10 minutes left, 8 minutes. So I'm going to give, there are 2 more questions. I'll give you 4 minutes each. KK, you are next. KK.
我學到好多嘢，我希望講廣東話，因為我啲英語咧唔係咁流利嘅已經。我由細到大咧，一路都睇中國歷史。李先生所講，從100幾年咧，嗰個啱啱咧就係我哋國家咧最需要嘅時間。所以無論你有啲人幾努力爭取平等，但係若國係無外交嘅，我哋受到嘅歧視咧，就係因為我哋有一個弱勢嘅政府，冇辦法能夠爭取平等。有好多華僑好愛國，佢哋 support 孫中山搞革命。呢啲係好嘢，但係我哋去到處處地方咧，無論去到喺美國、喺歐洲，一樣係受到歧視。直至到有一日，中國爆咗第一粒原子彈，呢個世界開始轉變。到今日，我哋今時今日享受到嘅地位。我睇主要就係因為背後我哋一個好強大嘅中國，而好多人點解科學家點解由美國走翻去咧？因為始終我哋係黃皮膚，佢哋係白人，而現行嘅佢哋好驚我哋。雖然我哋知道我哋中國人唔會蝦人，強大咗唔會蝦人。但係西方嘅係叢林嘅主義係咪弱肉強食資本主義社會，咁我諗呢個解釋咗好多嘢，係點解發生係咁嚟咧？我講嘅係咁多。
Thank you. That's I guess there's not a question. I don't 100% agree. I agree with that if I were living in Asia, but in America, my roots are here and my descendants will be here. And when they won't look like me and they won't have the cultural background, the Chinese cultural background, it becomes a different issue. If I were to move back to Asia, I might agree with you. But being here in America is very different. So I'll take the next question.
Okay, all right. Frank, you are next. You have the last question.
Okay, thank you, Winston. David, thanks for your presentation. You show us a very clear history of American Chinese. First of all, I believe both of USA and Canada have made a big progress to forbidden discrimination, at least from the law, right? the equality has been emphasized. But actually, I believe the discrimination still exists. Canada is much better than USA, I think. In United States, I think the first reason is because of some bad politician, such as Trump. Say he called COVID-19 as a Chinese virus or Wuhan virus, right? It's a very obvious discrimination. And Amazon is a huge company. They have frozen many business accounts of cross-border e-commerce companies from China. I'm not sure whether some discrimination exists in these cases. With more 100 billion RMB has been frozen. Hello? Hey, I can show you.
Yeah, we can still hear you and see you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so even my friend company, yeah, he has more than 600 million RMB has been frozen by Amazon. They tried to send lawyers to USA, yeah, to protect their rights, but some people tell them no quality in USA, give up. Then he really gave up. They don't believe they really can be treated equally, because maybe some because of the political reason. Because they and now the White House, they treat China as a big competitor. So they send a lot of limitation to Chinese companies, and then some discrimination will happen. Thirdly, I think American Chinese maybe should learn from some Black American. If they are discriminated, right, they can react very soon, and they can demonstrate to protest very strongly. So many American politicians, they will care about the Black American more than American Chinese, I think. So I think maybe we can learn more from the American, Black American, how they protect their equality. Okay, yeah, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, that again is a statement that the Blacks probably have more political clout, which they do now, but they have not benefited from the Civil Rights Act as much as Asian Americans. Asian Americans, we are currently the most educated, the highest income in the United States. We have the highest, but within that group, Asian group, we also have the lowest income and lowest education. Some of it, but on average we are. So we've progressed much faster after the Civil Rights Act. So it's more than just rights, is other factors play in. Cultural values and so on, I think plays an important part. So, and if you look forward, Asian Americans are the fastest growing ethnicity. So maybe in another 30 years, the population, voting population of Asians will probably be larger than Blacks. And in the last few elections in Georgia, the media is picking up that they need the Asian vote because elections are won by 1 or 2%. And the Asian votes are starting to count, to be a part. So I see optimism in that end. But besides that, I think with the intermarriage we have in America, in another 50 years, we're all going to be mixed. So will you be racist against yourself? You know, because the America's just that way. You know, people fall in love, they get married. We're having 35 to 40% interracial marriage. So really in 3 generations, we're all going to be mixed. So for the Chinese in America, this is what we look at. And, will racism disappear when everybody's mixed?
Hope so.
And I'll end it with that.
I don't agree with that. You looking Chinese or not is different from racism. You can, even right now, you can look Chinese, it's okay, people are proud of it. Oh, I even go to dim sum and they regard themselves not a racist because they go to Chinatown and eat hagao. But you cannot be Chinese. If you're on the side of China, if you are culturally more aligned with Chinese attitude, then there's something wrong with you. I don't care what you look like, that is the problem.
Yes. Well, today, no politician in America can win an election if they are pro-China. I can tell you that now. So how Chinese American are treated depends on U.S.-China relations. And this is true for a lot of other countries. So I'll conclude with that. But thank you for your input, James.
So thank you. Now there's a new person here. I want to give her a chance. Anna Un, can you unmute yourself? Say a few words because I noticed that you are new. And can you just say hi?
I'm a guest of David's.
Oh.
Yeah, Anna helped me put together the PowerPoint. I'm not technically competent. So Anna teaches Asian American Studies at UC Berkeley and at San Francisco State. She teaches Asian American Studies and Gender Studies.
Okay. Yeah, I can tell when I watch her that she probably enjoyed this. So I just thought, just want to say hi. So thank you, Anna,
actually,
for
thank
coming.
you for inviting me. I did find the conversation, especially the Q&A, very, very stimulating. I find your group very, very interesting. Would like to hear some more of your talks.
Okay, just make sure you leave me a WhatsApp or whatever, David, give it to me, and then I'll make sure you are included. Okay. All right. So David, thank you very much. It was a really excellent. I can tell because people still want to stay around. No one left yet. So thank you, David, for a very, very good presentation, and I hope that you can come back. For a different, more, cultural or other topics.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
So bye-bye. Thank you, everybody. Good night and good night.